I always thought love was needed for a marriage to be valid in the Catholic faith, but it recently occurred to me that the royals didn't typically love their spouses. Is marrying for political and financial gain permitted by Catholic law?
Well, first you've got to define what you mean by love. Now we think of love, well, no, I'm serious. I mean, we think of love as this gooey feeling for nothing more than feel. I did that last time.
You did that last time, yeah.
We think of it as a sort of gooey feeling, but it's very specific. Love is wanting the very best thing possible for the other person. Now, when you think of it that way, it's not really terribly romantic until you stop and think of what that means. It means, for one thing, that the emphasis of love is not your feelings, but the good of the other person. That's true love. You see, unfortunately in our society, we interpret love to mean the gooey feelings I have for someone, which are presumably in return for what they do for me. But true love is wanting the very best for the other individual. And of course, there are several kinds of love, as C.S. Lewis goes on in The Four Loves about. But bear in mind that the marrying of one world to another does in fact involve love, even if they don't know each other. Why is that? Well, number one, it certainly involves love of country, because these marriages were contracted for the good of the people. Alliances and all that, one hoped, leading to peace, and peace leading to not so many people dying or paying horrendous taxes. Secondly, very often with arranged marriages, they came to love one another as they got to know one another. A very great example of this sort was Charles I of England and his queen, the French Princess Henriette Marie, after whom Maryland was named. They barely knew each other and did not like one another very much when they first married. But then they got to know each other, and they fell in love, quite literally.
Okay.
Another couple like that were Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette, George III and Charlotte of Mecklenburg-Strelitz, or for that matter, Victoria and Albert. You know, very often, while there were some glaring examples of royals that really couldn't stand one another, the royal couples, I mean, very often they grew to love one another. And of course, such people would go into the marriage with the hope that they would do so.
Okay. So it sounds like you're saying that marrying for political and financial gain is permitted by Catholic law because there is still love there.
There is love there, and again, bear in mind that that gain is not for the individuals, but for their peoples.
Okay.
They already got all they want. They're king. What are you going to do? What are you going to give me? I mean, there's nothing to give me. I've got all the resources of my country at my disposal. But the people who benefit from marital alliances are actually the peoples.
Ah.
Because if our two houses are connected by marriage, the likelihood of our people fighting each other is reduced. So,
okay, he has a couple follow-up questions. You may have answered these already. Is love between spouses necessary at all for a marriage to be valid in the eyes of God? Or is love for God enough? You kind of answered that.
yeah, I mean, again, as long as they're not being forced into it, and that would invalidate
You mean
the
against
marriage.
their will, like
Against
they don't
their
want to
will.
do it?
No, they don't want to do it. That would invalidate the marriage if
Okay.
they were being forced into it. But if they're both agreed to it, love in the sense that we think of it is not necessary. And I mean, so if you think about it for a minute, think of how most people think about love of God. It doesn't give them romantic, gooey feelings, does it? It's based upon reality. It's gratitude, primarily. Your love of God would be based on, because He's your creator and your sustainer.
Yeah.
You know, you take one breath from minute to minute because God wills that you should do so. If He ever stopped doing so, that'd be it. So, our love of God is not a romantic thing. It's based first on His creating us and His redeeming us, His dying for us, and all. It's all based on gratitude. So similarly, your love for your spouse in such a circumstance is based upon duty, because you have a duty to try to love her for the sake of your peoples initially, and then as very often as they got to know each other, it very much became for themselves. Well, I remember reading how both George III and Louis XVI were considered very peculiar because of their love of their wives and their refusal to take mistresses.
Wow.
There's a reason that Europe was not the best of health in the 18th century.